Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, hi, I'm Sydney. I'm starting the true crime channel. This is the second one that I'm doing and I'm super pumped. So if you guys are into true crime, I would suggest that you hit that subscribe button because I will be posting every Thursday and it will be all 50 states. So we're gonna be here almost a whole year. As y'all are watching this, today is the first day of fall. I know that this is gonna be posted in October, so happy fall everybody. I hope that you guys are having a great fall, a great school year, or if you're not in school, that everything's opening back up and y'all are enjoying yourselves. Yeah, so today, without further ado, we're gonna talk about Robert Hansen. Fixed my camera angle to bring you guys a little in closer to me, you know. Robert Christian Hansen was born February 15th, 1939, making him an Aquarius. He was born in Esterville, Iowa by Edna and Christian Hansen, hence his dad's first name giving him his middle name. His father was a Danish immigrant and owned a bakery, and it said that he actually had a pretty hard life growing up. As he was growing up, it was really rough because his father would make him work really long hours at the bakery, and Robert was actually born like primarily left-handed. He was really strong doing things with his left hand, but his father like forced him to do stuff with his right hand, which actually weirdly caused a stuttering problem. His father showed him little affection and he was very short-tempered. So Robert growing up was known to be pretty shy. He was bullied a lot for his stutter, and he also had really bad acne, which resulted in really bad acne scars all over his face. Because he didn't have many friends, he had to take up new hobbies, and so he kind of got into hunting. He was really good at hunting. He was really good with guns, and he kind of stalked animals before he killed them. And so this kind of describes a lot of serial killers that kind of get into like killing animals at a very young age. So take that as a foreshadow. In 1957, Robert graduated high school and he joined the Army Reserves. He thought that like this could make a name for himself. He kind of wanted a fresh start from not really having that much growing up and not really having that many friends. He kind of wanted to make a new name for himself. Him being in the reserves was actually really good for him. He actually became a drill sergeant and he ended up marrying a woman in Pocahontas, Iowa. I didn't really get a name for her, but the marriage didn't really last that long. So besides him having a rough family life, since his life was getting a little bit better, he still felt like the community owed him something and that he kind of wanted to take out vengeance. So in December of 1960, he actually had one of his bakery employees help him burn down a bus garage. He manipulated this young boy into not saying anything. When the boy came out to the police actually arrested him, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and his wife divorced him while he was in prison. And while he was in prison, he had to do psych evaluations because, you know, arson is kind of crazy. And, well, really doing anything to get you in prison is crazy, but whatever. He had to do psych evaluations, and he was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Hansen only actually served 20 months of his 3-year sentence, and whenever he got out, he actually met and fell in love with Darla Henriksen. They went on to have 2 children, and then in 1967, they moved to Anchorage, Alaska. Whenever they moved, they were actually really well liked and they had a really good family upbringing. Were really well known in the town and really well liked, and Robert actually opened up his own bakery. Patrons at the bakery said that Robert was really well liked even though he was really shy, and there was nothing that kind of like sparked them into thinking that he was kind of like suspicious or anything like that. They actually really enjoyed him and his bakery, and they gave him his business all the time. Although Robert's life was great again after getting out of prison and meeting his wife and moving, he still felt like the girls that he had come across with 14 years earlier who mocked and bullied him for his skin. He still felt like a hatred towards women. In 1971, sex workers were starting to disappear all over Anchorage, and they were, you know, it was around the time that it was like the most cold out of the year, so they were willing to get in the car with anyone just to warm up, even if they weren't going to do anything. His first attempt to abduct an 18-year-old Susie Hepburn was kind of clumsy. He failed to abduct her. He tried to abduct her at gunpoint, and she went to the police, and he was actually charged with assault with a deadly weapon. So only days later, he actually abducted another girl. She was a topless dancer, and he took her to the Kenai Peninsula, where he brutally raped her. As he was driving back to Anchorage, he actually decided to stop the car and make her get out and made her run as he pointed his Ruger Mini 14 at her and was gonna kill her. The dancer actually begged him and manipulated him into not killing her. She pleaded with him to the point that he was like, "I'll let you live, but you have to write down every name and every address of anybody that is your family, your friend, or that you've come in contact with, so that if you go to the police, I will find them and I will kill them." On Christmas Day of 1971, there was a naked woman's body found in the Kenai Peninsula. The topless dancer that he had abducted before the body was found actually felt that the series was similar. So she went to the police and saying, like, "I know that this is the person that abducted me earlier," and she was able to identify Robert with a series of photos that police had showed her. Robert was arrested and had a $50,000 bail. But however, Robert's friend and even his minister at his church, they were able to like help Robert out by saying like there was absolutely no way that he did this. He was a very swell guy. And they actually threw it back on the dancer, saying that she was off on drugs and she's a sex worker. Like, why would you believe her? It's so sad. Like, that hurts my heart so bad. The dancer was not able to stand the constant attacks against her, and everybody just like, you know, not believing her. So she just dropped the charges. She knew that she couldn't win. Not long after that though, Robert was actually sentenced to 5 years for the assault of the very first girl, Susie, the one that he had like just stupidly tried to abduct and didn't even do it correctly. I'm saying that like I know how to abduct somebody. I genuinely don't. I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm so sorry. Not long after that, Robert only spent 3 months of his 5-year sentence. He actually manipulated the warden into thinking that he was like a model prisoner, and the warden said that there was no way he was a threat to society, so they granted him early release. During his 3-month period at this prison, he was fine from his previous diagnosis and his last sentence that he was serving, where they basically said that he had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He was reevaluated by psychiatrists, and they were basically like, "No, he's good. He doesn't have that." I don't know why they said that, but he don't have it. As we get into it, in this 12-year period that this was going on, it's hard to say when the murders actually started to happen, because at this point he's only abducted and raped girls. He has not murdered anybody. All this was starting in 1971, where he was just picking up women and raping them and then dropping them back off, and this was all of the sex workers that were in downtown Anchorage. In 1976, Robert was arrested for stealing a chainsaw from a local store. It was a 5-year-long sentence, and he actually only ended up serving 16 months of that sentence. And the warden was basically like, "He's just the friendly neighborhood baker. He's done nothing wrong. He's an outstanding citizen." Starting in 1978 to 1983, women that were sex workers were disappearing all around Anchorage, and some returned, but some didn't. During this time, Robert had actually purchased a small 2-seater plane, and he would take these girls and he would take them to his cabin to the Nick River at Matanuska Valley. First, he would pick up women in his car and he would bring them to his basement and his house. Yes, the house that his kids and his wife lived at. And he would bring them to the basement, where it was completely off limits to the family, and he would brutally torture and rape these women for hours. He also kept a lot of souvenirs, and this is where he kept his guns and his mounted animals on the wall. But then he would get his victims to be in his car at gunpoint, and then he would take them to his plane, where he would fly them to the cabin in the woods, where he would start his game hunt. But whenever he would drop them off, he would have the women be naked, and then he would blindfold them and just drop them off in the woods. So it was kind of like a game for him, because it would make the women think that they had a small chance of freedom where they could run. but this was actually where Robert was pretending that they were animals, and he would basically hunt them. And this went on for like a long time. Like, he would let them run around for hours, and then he would finally shoot them. Around his cabin, he would dig shallow graves to put the women's bodies in, and he would actually take like a jewelry or a driver's license from them, and that was his souvenir that he would keep in his basement. He had a map basically like showing and displaying what his cabin and his land looked like, and he would draw an X where he would bury the body so that he could hop on his plane and fly back home to his house. There was many different women from 1978 to 1983, and in 1983 he actually abducted the wrong girl. Cindy Paulson was a 17-year-old sex worker that Robert had offered $200 for the night. She states that this man was tall and thin, had acne scars all over his face, and he had a really bad stutter. Whenever he offered to pick her up, she didn't think he was threatening at all because he was very shy, he didn't really talk, and so she decided, you know, I'll get in the car with him. But as soon as she got in the car, Robert handcuffed her and put a gun to her head immediately. Before Cindy, there were 17 other victims, and he basically did the exact same thing, normal routine that he had done with all the other women, and Cindy was no different. But this is the kicker, she was different. So he did the same thing again. He brought her down to his basement where he had brutally raped her, but it was so late at night that he was tired. So in the basement, he tied her to a wooden post, and he had a couch that was next to the wooden post, so just in case she tried to escape, he could wake up and he could, you know, keep her into the basement. So the next morning, Robert put Cindy in his car and he drove to the airport that he kept his plane. And he was basically getting ready, doing his normal things, getting the plane prepared and untied and all that. And his back was facing Cindy. She took this opportunity to crawl out of the driver's seat and make a run for it, and it was too late by the time Robert noticed. So Cindy was still handcuffed, and she was only wearing a shirt and her underwear, and she was running to a road that was actually 6th Avenue, where she flagged down a motorist named Richard Young. Richard actually brought Cindy to the Mush Inn, where she was able to call police, and he basically described the condition that she was in, and it was awful. She had cuts all up down her legs from running, she was freezing, it was really bad. But Cindy had took a cab to another hotel, and there the police were gonna meet her, bring her clothes, and drive her to the police station to question her and figure out what exactly happened. She gave them details, as much details as she could. She told them about what Robert looked like, the basement that she was in, the plane that she was going to at the airport. So whenever they went to the airport to see what plane it was, after she told them that it was the airplane, they found out that it was registered to Robert Hansen. The police actually drove to Robert's house, and they were going to actually ask them everything, question him, and he denied everything. He actually had an alibi with one of his friends that lied for him, saying that they were out drinking that night at the time that she was abducted. Of course, police believed him and his alibi, because who's gonna believe the sex worker who has no friends and nobody to back her up with this? But a lot of bodies of women were showing up all around the Anchorage area at this time. So the first woman was unidentified. They named her Alukna Annie because she was found near the Alukna Road, but nobody was able to identify her and her name. She had nothing on her that would help, you know, explain to police like who she was. She had no form of identification at all. But the only thing that they could come up with was around the time of her death. She was probably murdered between November or December of 1979. In May of 1980, the body of Joanna Messina was found in a gravel pit near Seward, Alaska. In September of 1982, Sherry Morrow's body was found near the Nick River, and only a year after Sherry's body was found, Paula Golding's body was found in the exact same area. All of these women were known to be sex workers in the Anchorage area, but they still couldn't figure out anything about Alukna Annie. The Alukna Annie had been stabbed to death, but they found bullet casing shells near the body of Paula and Sherry. Detective Glenn Floth was a part of the Alaskan State Troopers who was assigned to the case as soon as the missing body of Alukna Annie was found, and he was convinced that there was a serial killer in Anchorage. So the bullet casing shells that were found near the bodies were sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C., and it came back that they were the exact same shell from the exact same gun. This kind of just like showed authorities that this was the same exact person, so since it was the same gun, it was the same perpetrator. Well, even though Cindy did not get her justice at all, Detective Floth actually believed her, and so he called the sheriff's station in Anchorage to let them know that there was a serial killer that was on the loose for them. He had reached out to the FBI and contacted special agents John Douglas and Roy Hazelwood. They were a part of the FBI support, and they actually contacted Glenn Floth, a detective from Anchorage, and asked them to give them as many details as he could so they could profile the killer and like exactly what's going on. Douglas had actually predicted everything that was wrong with Robert. He said that this guy was probably really shy and kept to himself. He probably has something along with his body that made people make fun of him that would make him want to have like revenge against a certain person. So he kind of put together the pieces that it was women, since he was only killing women and targeting them. So he was like, he has to have some kind of revenge against women, that he would, you know, want to kill all these women. And it was true. And because of what Cindy had said was in the basement, the FBI profiler actually decided that he was really good at hunting. He was like, he probably has a lot of trophies from, you know, his big hunts that he had. And it was true. It was in the basement that Cindy had explained. He had also stated that there was no way that the bodies that were being found could get to by car, so he had to have a plane. And obviously, Robert had a plane to get to the bodies. So Anchorage PD had a search warrant for Robert's home, his plane, and his bakery. And in the home, they actually found absolutely everything. They found all of the souvenirs, and then they also found the map that explained the Anchorage area where the bodies were, and they saw the X's on it, and so they decided that's probably where he had marked that that's where he had buried the bodies. When the investigators reached out to the friends that were supposedly the alibi whenever Cindy was abducted, they had, you know, kind of gave in and said, yeah, we were lying, which made Robert look a little bit more guilty. Whenever he was questioned, Robert finally confessed, saying that between the times of 1971 and 1983, Robert had actually abducted, raped, and murdered 17 women, and he had buried their bodies in the Alaskan tundra. Whenever they were looking more closely at the map, they actually saw there was 24 X's, but Robert had only confessed to 17. Only. Robert was charged with sexual assault, kidnapping, multiple offenses of deadly weapons, and theft. He was also charged separately for the kidnapping and rape of Cindy. He pled guilty to the murders of the 4 bodies that police had already found, and then he also pled guilty to the 17 murders out of the 24 bodies that were found on the Anchorage map. Robert was sentenced 461 years plus life, but it's also not shown how many times there was rapes that Robert committed but did not murder, because those victims did not come forward, so there's no telling how many people that were raped due to Robert. Robert died at the age of 75 on August 21st, 2014 due to natural causes. He died at Spring Creek Correctional Facility in Seward, Alaska. Alaska's never had the death penalty, and that is why Robert's sentencing was so long. I'm really sad that he didn't get to spend out those 461 years, you know. I really wish that criminals that have such long sentencing could actually live, you know, their long sentencing, but it's whatever, I guess. All right, you guys, so that was a doozy. True crime. A lot of people like it. It's weird, we don't know why, but we do. There we go, that's Alaska for you. You got some crazy people up there. I actually read that Alaska has a lot of serial killers. There's like a lot more serial killers in Alaska that we don't even know about, so. But also, like, people also forget that Alaska's like even a state. Like, I also forget that there's a bunch of different states, so I'm actually excited for this because I totally forgot Wyoming was a state, and whenever I was doing research for Wyoming,
I was so confused.
I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below if there's anything that reaches out to you the most. or just comment if you just didn't like it, if you did like it. So I hope that y'all did like it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that y'all are having a wonderful start of fall. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week with Arizona. Bye.